They say that every house has a story. Most are filled with memories of families, holidays, and laughter. But some houses are built on top of secrets so dark, they stain the very ground beneath them. In the city of Iasi, about 100 years ago, there was a home that looked perfectly normal. From the outside, it was just a simple building made of wood and stone. It sat on a quiet street, blending in with every other house on the block. But if you had walked past that house late at night, when the rest of the city was fast asleep, you might have noticed a faint, flickering light coming from the basement windows. Inside, the owner wasn't sleeping. While his neighbors were dreaming, he was busy in the pitch-black corners of his cellar. He wasn't repairing the walls. He wasn't fixing the pipes. He was digging. One by one, people in the city began to vanish. Travelers, merchants, young women, they would simply disappear. The police had no leads. But that house. The house knew exactly where they were. Today, we go beneath the floorboards. This is the story of the butcher of Iasi. And you are inside the well of monsters. To truly understand the kind of monster that walked the streets of Iasi, we have to go back. We have to look at the world he came from. Because, as you're about to see, the world that created Vasile was not a happy place. Imagine you're a young man, just starting your life. But instead of going to school or finding a job, you wake up one morning, and your country is gone. A great war breaks out. A world war. And suddenly, Bukovina, your homeland, is right in the middle of a battlefield. For years, massive armies march through Vasile's village. These soldiers, they don't just walk through. They burn the houses. They take all the food. They take everything. In this new world, there is no law. There are no police to call. There is no one to protect you. There is only one rule: survival. Vasile learns a very dark, very cold lesson. He learns that a human life is cheap. It's worth nothing. To stay alive, you couldn't be nice. You couldn't be kind. You had to be faster, stronger, and meaner than the person next to you. While other young men his age were dreaming about the future, about getting married or building a home, Vasile wasn't dreaming at all. He wasn't even living. He was hiding. He spent his entire youth in those deep, dark forests, watching the world burn. He was watching, and he was waiting. He wasn't a victim of the war. He was a student of it. By the time the war ended, the empires were gone. The borders had changed. But something else was gone too, something inside Vasile. He didn't come out of those woods as a survivor. When he finally stepped into the city of Iasi, he came out as a predator. But the war was only half the story. You see, when the soldiers finally left and the smoke cleared, Vasile didn't go back to a home filled with warmth or comfort. He went back to a house where the silence was just as dangerous as the battlefield. Vasile didn't come from a family of criminals. Not at all. He came from a family of hardworking peasants. But in that house, there was no love. There was only work. And there was only strength. Imagine being a young boy in that world. In his parents' eyes, if you weren't strong enough to pull a plow or carry a sack, you were useless. Money was something you almost never saw, but violence. Violence was everywhere. Vasile never knew what a mother's hug felt like. He never had a father to guide him. Instead, his only teachers were the end of a leather belt or a heavy, closed fist. Very early on, he learned a terrifying lesson: the only way to get what you want, or to solve a problem, was through pain. While the other kids in the village were playing together, making friends, and learning how to be human, Vasile was drifting away. Even in his own home, among his own blood, he was a total stranger. He didn't talk. He didn't bond with his brothers or sisters. He began to prefer the deep, freezing silence of the woods. Because in the forest, he didn't have to be a son. He didn't have to be a brother. Out there, in the shadows, he could just be a hunter. He was learning how to be alone. He was learning how to watch, how to wait, and, most importantly, how to stay quiet. Vasile was sharpening the skills of a predator. And very soon, he was going to take those skills out of the forest, and bring them right into the heart of the city. So, with the skills of a hunter and a heart that felt nothing, Vasile finally left the trees behind. He was about 20 years old when he walked into the city of Iasi. Now, you have to picture this city back then. It was crowded, noisy, and full of people moving from the countryside looking for a better life. Vasile was just another face in the crowd. He blended in perfectly. He was invisible. He took any job he could find. He worked for blacksmiths, hitting heavy iron all day. But then, he found a job in the local butcher shops. And this? This is where everything changed. Most people walk into a butcher shop and see food. Vasile? He saw something else. Every single day, he was surrounded by the metallic smell of blood. He spent hours learning exactly how to slide a blade between joints, how to cut through thick bone, and how to take apart a body. He wasn't just learning a trade to make money. He was getting used to the tools of death. The sight of blood didn't bother him. The sound of a bone snapping didn't make him flinch. He was becoming a master of the blade. But here's the thing about Vasile. He didn't want to work hard for a living. He didn't want to be a butcher, he wanted what other people had. So, he started to steal. At first, it was small. A broken window here, a stolen wallet there. But as he walked those busy streets, he realized something very dangerous. The city was a mess. The police were overwhelmed. And if a man looked normal, if he looked like just another hardworking guy, he could get away with almost anything. And Vasile was very good at looking normal. He was no longer a simple farm boy. He was now a thief who knew exactly how to use a knife. And he was starting to realize that the most valuable things in the city weren't found in shops. They were found in the pockets of people who were alone. People who were traveling. People who wouldn't be missed. So, how exactly does a petty thief, a guy stealing wallets and breaking windows, turn into a full-blown monster? For Vasile, the answer was chillingly simple. It was greed. See, Vasile didn't look at people the way you or I do. He didn't see a father, a daughter, or a friend. To him, a human being was just a wallet that was waiting to be opened. And he became a master of the lie. He would spend his days at the train station or the busy markets of Iasi, just watching. He would look for the lonely traveler. The merchant with a heavy bag. Or a woman looking for a fresh start. He would walk up to them, flash a warm, friendly smile, and offer them a great business deal. Or maybe just a hot meal at his place. He even promised some of these women that he wanted to marry them. And because he looked so normal, they followed him. They thought they had found a friend in a cold city. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. The moment they stepped inside his house, the vibe changed. The front door was locked. The smile on Vasile's face, it just vanished. He would lead them down these narrow, creaking wooden stairs, down into the pitch-black basement. Now, Vasile was smart. He knew a gun was too loud. A gunshot brings the police. So, he went back to his roots. He used his skills from the blacksmith shop to build something special. A custom tool. It was a heavy axe, but he had cut the handle short. It was designed specifically for that tiny, cramped basement. It was small enough to swing in the dark, but heavy enough to end a life with one single blow. And he did it for almost nothing. He would kill a man for a few coins. He would kill a woman for her coat or a pair of leather boots. Sometimes, he killed just because he liked the feeling of being the one in control. Vasile became a shadow in his own home, just sitting there in the silence, waiting for the next knock on the door. And meanwhile, deep beneath the floorboards, the dirt was getting soft. The well in the basement was starting to fill up. And the city of Iasi had no idea what was growing right under its feet. Now, investigators today still aren't 100% sure who the very first victim was. There were just so many bodies found in the end that the timeline is a bit of a blur. But most people believe it all started with a man from the local market in Iasi. Vasile was just standing there, blending into the crowd like he always did. And he was watching. He spotted a merchant, a guy who clearly had a lot of cash on him and was wearing very expensive, high-quality clothes. But Vasile didn't pull out a knife. He didn't reach for a gun. Instead, he used his words. He walked up to the man, flashed that same normal smile, and told him a story. He claimed he had a warehouse nearby, filled with luxury goods that he was willing to sell for almost nothing. It was the deal of a lifetime. And the merchant, thinking he was about to make a huge profit, followed Vasile right into his home. Vasile led him down those same creaking stairs, deep into the quiet of the basement. He pointed to a wooden box on the floor and told the man the samples were inside. The second that merchant leaned over to look, Vasile didn't hesitate. He didn't feel a moment of doubt. He swung a heavy iron bar with everything he had, striking the man from behind. It was over in a heartbeat. And standing there, in that dark, silent room with a dead man at his feet, Vasile realized something. Something that changed him forever. He didn't feel sick. He didn't feel scared. In fact, he felt happy. He looked down and realized that by hiding this body, he didn't just get the cash. He got the man's expensive clothes. He got his gold watch. And most importantly, he got the man's total silence. To Vasile, this wasn't a horrific crime. It was just a very successful business deal. He had finally found his path. And that basement? It was officially open for business. Most serial killers take a break between their crimes. They wait months, sometimes years. But not Vasile. He didn't kill because he had a dark urge. He killed because he was low on cash. If he saw someone with a nice coat or a full wallet, that was it. To him, it was just a job. He moved so fast and killed so often that eventually, he actually lost count. He was living on top of a mountain of secrets, and he started to believe he was invisible. He thought his basement was the perfect graveyard. A place where the police would never, ever look. And because he felt so safe, he became incredibly bold. Imagine this, Vasile would invite his neighbors over for a drink. They would sit at his wooden kitchen table, laughing and clinking glasses. But just a few inches beneath their boots, in the dark dirt under the floorboards, lay the people he had killed. Vasile would just sit there, smiling and pouring more wine. He knew exactly what was under them. To him, it was a sick, private game. He didn't feel bad. He didn't have nightmares. He would walk the streets, wave at the police, and shop at the same markets where he found his victims. To Vasile, murder was as natural as breathing. He eventually reached a terrifying number, 26 souls. 26 people who walked into that house and never walked out. Vasile felt like a god. But then, he made one massive mistake. He thought he could just sell the house and walk away from his secrets. But he was wrong. Because a new family was moving in, and they were about to find exactly what he had left behind. Vasile thought he could just pack his bags and leave his victims behind. He thought that by selling the house, he was selling the evidence. But he was wrong. In 1935, a new family moved in. They didn't know the history of the house. They didn't know about the man who lived there before. They just wanted to fix the place up. The new owner decided to renovate the basement. He hired a few workers to go down into that dark, quiet cellar and level out the dirt floor. It was supposed to be a normal day of hard work. But as the workers moved toward one specific corner, the ground felt different. You know that feeling when you walk on solid ground? Well, this wasn't solid. It was soft. It felt like mud that had been moved recently. One worker took his shovel, leaned his weight into it, and pushed down. He expected to hit hard stone or clay. But instead, the shovel sank. It slid deep into the earth with almost no resistance, like he was cutting through wet sand. He frowned and pulled the shovel back to see what was buried there. And that's when he saw it. Peeking out from the dark dirt, wasn't a rock. It was the smooth, white curve of a human skull. The worker froze. He didn't wait to see more. He dropped his shovel, ran up those creaking stairs, and screamed for the police. When the officers arrived at the house in Iasi, they initially thought they had found one old grave. But as they kept digging, the horror grew. They didn't find one body. They found six. 6 people, stacked on top of each other, hidden right under the floorboards. Vasile's secrets were finally coming to the surface. And the police knew exactly whose name was on the deed of that house. They spread the papers out on a desk, and there, right at the top, was the name, Vasile Tcaciuc. Now, the lead detective looks at the name. Then he looks at the police logs from just a few weeks prior. And his heart drops. He realizes they don't need to launch a manhunt. They don't need to search the city. Because Vasile was already in their system. He was currently sitting in a cold stone cell, just a few hallways away, serving a 12-month sentence for stealing a handful of coins and some old clothes. Think about the irony of that. For years, the police in Iasi had been walking past this man. They had arrested him for petty crimes. They treated him like a common, low-level thief. But as they looked at the bones being pulled from his former basement, they realized the terrifying truth. The man they had behind bars for stealing a few coins, was actually the monster the entire city had been breathing next to for years. They hadn't caught a thief. They had accidentally walked a predator right into their own jail. The detectives didn't waste another second. They grabbed their coats, headed down to the cell blocks, and prepared to look into the eyes of a man who had turned a family home into a slaughterhouse. The detectives headed straight to the prison. They walked into that cold interrogation room expecting a struggle. They expected Vasile to cry, to deny everything, or to beg for mercy. But when they sat down across from him, they found a man who looked bored. Vasile just sat there, leaning back, completely calm. It was like they were sitting in a cafe talking about the weather. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. Even with the evidence of the basement staring him in the face, Vasile acted like he didn't have a care in the world. Until, the lead detective reached into a bag and pulled out an object they had found hidden at the house. It was Vasile's custom-made, short-handled axe. The second Vasile saw that weapon, the tool he had built with his own hands, his entire demeanor changed. He didn't get scared. He didn't get angry. He just gave up. He realized the game was over. But instead of staying quiet, Vasile started to talk. And he didn't stop. He didn't just admit to those 6 bodies in the basement. He started listing names. He talked about the travelers at the station. He talked about the merchants. He talked about the women who thought they were going to marry him. By the time he was done, the number was staggering. 26 souls. He looked the detectives dead in the eye and told them he had killed so many people, he couldn't even remember all their names. To him, they weren't humans anymore. They were just numbers in a long, dark game that he had finally lost. The detectives were frozen in shock. They realized they weren't just looking at a petty thief. They were standing in front of the most dangerous predator in the history of the city. To make sure this wasn't all just some sick fantasy, the police took Vasile out of his cell, put him in heavy iron chains, and led him back out into the streets of Iasi. They told him one thing: show us. And Vasile, he didn't look scared. He didn't look like a man facing the end. He looked like a tour guide. He led the detectives to old rental houses, to empty, overgrown yards, and to quiet street corners. He would just stop, stare at a patch of dirt with total indifference, and say 4 words: "You should dig here." And every single time the shovels hit the ground, they found more remains. But as they moved from one site to the next, the atmosphere in the city began to change. The news had spread like wildfire. Thousands of people started pouring into the streets. They weren't there to watch a trial. They were there for revenge. The air was thick. You could feel the anger. People were screaming, calling him a monster, demanding his blood. The police were struggling just to keep the crowd back. And then, something very strange happened. According to the official police report, as they were standing in front of his old house of horrors, Vasile suddenly lunged. He supposedly tried to grab a guard's gun. The police claimed he was trying to escape into the very crowd that wanted him dead. Fearing they would lose him or that the mob would tear him apart, the officers opened fire. Vasile was shot several times. He collapsed right there, in the dirt, just feet away from the basement where he had ended so many lives. The butcher of Iasi was dead before he even hit the ground. But here is the part that still gets talked about today. Many people don't believe that escape attempt ever happened. They believe the police saw the anger of the people and decided right then and there to deliver instant justice. They shot him to make sure a monster like that would never cost the state another penny. Vasile was gone. But the shadows he left behind, they never really went away. Even today, people in the city say that some of those old houses still feel heavy. Like the walls are still breathing the secrets of the man who lived beneath the floorboards. And that is the story of the butcher of Iasi. When you look at the life of Vasile Tcaciuc, you realize something truly terrifying. He wasn't a man driven by demons. He didn't hear voices in his head, and he wasn't out of his mind. Vasile was something much colder. He was a man who had simply deleted the concept of humanity from his brain. To you or me, a person is a name, a family, a life full of dreams. But to Vasile, a person was just an object. He looked at a human being the same way a hunter looks at a deer in the woods. He didn't see a soul. He only saw a warm winter coat, a few gold coins, or a sturdy pair of leather boots. He lived entirely in the here and now. He didn't feel guilt about the people he killed yesterday, and he didn't worry about the consequences of tomorrow. He was fueled by a quiet, freezing greed. That's the most disturbing part. Vasile could sit across from you, he could smile, he could even clink glasses and drink wine with you all while calmly planning exactly how he was going to end your life in the next hour. He was a predator wearing a suit, hiding in plain sight in the middle of a busy, crowded city. Vasile thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought he was invisible. But in the end, the very house he turned into a trap became his own undoing. He built a graveyard, and eventually, that graveyard claimed him, too. That's it for today's episode. If you want to keep diving deep into the darkness with us, and if you're ready to hear more stories about the shadows of history, make sure you subscribe to the Well of Monsters. Because let's be honest, we live in a world full of monsters. And you really don't want to be the only one who doesn't know where they're hiding. I'll see you at the bottom of the well.